16 years ago, I made a friend one day on the bus. Up until about a year ago, I considered this guy a member of my family. Let's call this guy Joel. So I keep a crystal bowl on the mantel above my fireplace, full of my medical marijuana. I started noticing that after poker night, my bowl seemed a lot emptier than it should. So I set up a camera to see which one of my guests was helping themselves when my back was turned. Next poker night, once everyone is gone, I pull up the video. There Joel was, plain as day, stuffing like $60 worth of my medication into his pocket. I sent him the video and told him he had to return my medication or pay for it. And I told him that if he chose to do neither, he should no longer consider me a friend. He denied it. Even with the video staring him in the face, he said he hadn't taken anything. He even had the nerve to act offended by the fact that I accused him. So I decided to ruin his life. Over the years, he had told me a lot of things he didn't want his wife to know. Affairs, shady shit he did with their joint funds, drug issues, terrible things he said about her, her mother, and her sister. I went back through all of our messages and took screenshots of everything secret he had ever said to me. There were over 70 pics. I sent her the screenshots. Here are some examples of the kind of stuff that was in the screenshots. He admitted to cheating on her with 8 different women over the course of our friendship. Taking money they were saving for a car and using it to buy drugs, specifically Xanax and perks. The fact that he was continuing to do drugs after he promised her he was clean and sober. Some of the things he said about her and her family. She's a vile, disgusting woman. And the reason they never have sex is that he can't stand the smell in between her folds. He also said he was pretty sure she was molesting her niece. He said that all of her friends only pretend to like her so they can buy Oxys off her. Also, as I'm editing this, I just remembered that he said he wanted to get one of his side chicks pregnant because he'd always resented his wife for being infertile. Her sister is an insane harpy. Her sister abuses her kids. This is not true, but he said it. Her sister is faking her autoimmune disease for attention. Her mom is a fat, lazy cow who doesn't actually need to be in a wheelchair. She just likes not having to stand up or bathe herself. So she's malingering. There were more things, but that's what came to mind without me having to dig through the screenshots I sent. She filed for divorce and reported him to the police for the drugs he had in their house, while he was doing his 8 months in jail for the pot. He stole from me. His boss filled his position, and he lost his job. His, now ex-wife won't let him in her house. Now he lives in a car and showers at truck stops. I found out about the aftermath in parts. Some came from his ex-wife. She told me about the divorce, kicking him out, and getting him arrested. Some came from a guy Joel and I used to both be friends with, who works at the place Joel used to work. He told me about the job loss, car living, and the truck stop thing. I'm still on good terms with his ex-wife. I even sent her some enchiladas the other day for Cinco de Mayo. I also sent the video to all of our mutual friends, so he lost 90% of his social circle. I cut that other 10% out of my own life, since they want to associate with known thieves. Birds of a feather.
Next story.
So this story took place back when I was in Florida in the early 90s. It does involve an act of vandalism that is connected to revenge. Hopefully, it won't be removed, and hopefully it will count as nuclear revenge. Anyway, South Florida was devastated by Hurricane Andrew. My dad, as part of a local charity, was set up day after day at a local market seeking donations from shoppers to give to food banks. You have to understand this storm left many people homeless and without power in some cases for 6+ months in Florida heat and humidity. My father was legally disabled from a serious car accident. He was hit by a drunk driver in the early 80s and suffered from relentless hip and back problems. It never killed his heart or kindness to others, hence the charity work. One day, he was about to pull into the disabled space at the local market to go buy a few items to donate to the hurricane charity. Right before he is about to pull in, This lady pulls into the space in this shiny red Porsche. My dad parks behind her and says, "Excuse me, ma'am, I was about to pull in there," and also points to his disabled placard in the window. She says to him, "Theft, you don't look disabled," and proceeded to walk into the store. For anyone who has a relative who uses a disabled space, you know the frustration of this situation and the anger one feels. My dad, seemingly unfazed, waits until she goes into the store and then gets out and snips the valve stems on all 4 tires, flattening but not destroying all of them. He then pulls into another space not far away and just waits. About 15 minutes later, the lady comes out and is shrieking about her car being vandalized. My dad is far enough away so she can't see him, but he can hear EV Laro Tiang. She calls the police. Big mistake. She files a report for vandalism, and the police give her a ticket for being parked in the disabled space with no placard. About $250 at the time. The cops leave, and she calls a tow truck. As the car is being loaded onto the truck, my dad pulls up and says to her, "You don't look disabled, but your car sure is," and then drives off. My dad could be a nice guy and pure savage when he needed to be.
Next story.
The minor details of this story, place, time, will be kept vague for very obvious reasons. Note that this is my friend's story, who gave me permission to post. He swears it's real, and it's frankly way too fucked up to not be in my opinion. For ease of writing, I will write this in first person. My grandfather fought in World War II. He was part of a platoon that freed one of the concentration camps. After the war, he ended up working for my country's intelligence agencies for many years. In what capacity, he never said, but I imagine it was some shady shit. When we were in high school, my brother got caught groping one of the girls, but this was the 60s or 70s. Remember, keeping it vague. And all he got was a slap on the wrist. He was 15, I was 14. He would brag about it to his friends. To be fair, I also didn't see what the problem was at the time. Well, my mom didn't like that and told Grandpa. Grandpa had my brother and I over for dinner that night, just the 3 of us. Before Grandpa did anything, he asked about if what he heard was true, but he asked it in such a jovial and almost proud way. My brother was all too proud of himself. Grandpa got out a hammer and 3 roofing nails, then told us a story that I will never forget. So in World War II, Grandpa was part of a platoon that liberated a camp. One of the head honchos at this camp was still there. By this time, they had all seen or heard of the camps, what was being done to people there. During a sweep of the camp, he came across this honcho's room. In this room was a child, badly beaten, naked, in chains, somewhat enlarged abdomen. It was obvious what had happened to her. My grandpa and his squad mates got a hold of the honcho, stripped him, and tied him to a wooden chair. Grandpa then asked everyone else to leave, to not let anyone down the corridor, no matter what was heard. He sat in front of this Nazi and stared at him for a good half hour, never said a word to him. Then he took a hammer and 3 long nails, hammered 1 nail in each testicle and the 3rd through his dick and into the chair. He had to do this slowly and methodically to avoid making the testicles explode, or so he said. Grandpa left the room. Nazi left bound and gagged. Grandpa then barred the door from the outside. His squad did as they were told, never went in the room. They all left together. Grandpa doesn't know if the Nazi survived or was found. Grandpa told this story, not with glee or sorrow, but with a very cold tone. He then spoke to us and said something along the lines of, "Monsters attract other monsters and tend to get what they deserve. Are you going to be monsters, my brother?" And I said no, of course. We were terrified. Grandpa then drove one of the nails into the table, as if to drive the point home. "See that you don't. Now go home." Grandpa never mentioned the story again, nor did he ever speak in such a cold way to us again. It was as if he had never told us anything. My brother actually apologized to the girl in question. We both live pretty normal lives nowadays. Grandpa passed away some years back. We will never forget him. Edit. Thanks for all the awards.
Next story.
I originally posted this on Pro Revenge, but it got removed due to felonies. If it doesn't belong here either, please let me know. I'm on mobile, so sorry for the formation. Also, English is not my native language. Feel free to correct any mistakes. This is my mom's revenge, and it happened 13 years ago. Backstory. My dad passed away 22 years ago, before I was born. I have an older brother, and of course my amazing, beautiful mom. The guy who did it, let's call him Ben, was unfortunately my father's best friend. Before he passed away, they knew each other for years. After my parents met, Ben and my mom got to know each other as well. They got along pretty well, and soon became friends. Fast forward a couple of years, my mom got pregnant with my brother, and he didn't show any signs of being a pedophile or anything. He spent a lot of time with my brother, and eventually became his godfather. 2 years later, my dad passed away while my mom was pregnant with little me. Ben helped her as much as he could in those bad times, gifting us toys and buying food for us and everything. The happening. I was 9 when it all started. He often would stay overnight drinking with my mom. I hated it. He'd always wait until my mom went to bed, drink some more, and do horrible things to me. My mom never suspected a thing, and he would threaten me and say he'd hurt or kill my mother if I said anything, so I kept it to myself. After the worst and last time, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore, so I told my mother the morning after he left. She was furious and cried, blaming herself for not seeing the signs, and went to the police with me immediately, where we filed a report. They got to his home and searched his computer where he had child porn and arrested him. I'll skip the boring part of going to various doctors and the trial. He did get sentenced to 3 lousy years in prison. I'm still mad at this. On to the revenge. So my mom had connections to people who had connections to prisoners who were luckily in the same prison as he was. She told them what had happened, who he was, and everything they wanted to know. A few days later, my mom got a call from our lawyer, who told her he had to get transferred to another prison because the inmates threatened to kill him and beat him up pretty bad. My mom was happy about that. But what he had done kept spreading from prison to prison, so he had to be transferred multiple times because he kept getting beat up. I don't exactly know how many times. After he was released from prison 3 years later, he was registered as a sex offender and wasn't allowed anywhere near children. He moved far away from our city and tried leaving all of it behind, although my mom told me he had trouble finding a job. I haven't heard of him in years, but think of him almost every day. How he destroyed my life, but I do have to smile thinking of all the beatings he must have had. Thank you for making it to the end, and thank you to all prisoners who beat the living shit out of this fuckface. Edit. Changed his name from FF to Ben, not his real name. Edit 2. I'm really sorry if you think it wasn't enough of a revenge, but there was really not much my mom could do. She had 2 children, one severely traumatized. She didn't want to do anything risky and get in trouble. Her number 1 priority was to make our life as normal as possible after that. I don't know why he didn't get separated from the other inmates after the first few beatings. I know he should have, but I'm glad he didn't. Thank all of you for the love and support.
Next story.